We are now at number 9, and there's a new entry in my top 10 WrestleManias. This was never really on my radar, and I feel bad about that. I would like to formally apologize to WrestleMania 21 for never giving you the credit that you deserve. I know many of you really like this WrestleMania, and I think the problem for me was because my top 10 is so based on my own personal memories and feelings at the time, I was starting to slightly mentally check out of the business around this time. I've mentioned this before, around 2004, 5, and 6. I just didn't feel as a fan that it was the same WWE. Things felt much different. The Attitude Era was long gone. The Austins and the Rocks and guys like that were gone. It was kind of like a new era in the company, and it wasn't taking to me. It was kind of like a cold shower. I just didn't feel like it was what I was comfortable with. It was hard to describe. So I never really looked back very fondly on these years, but there was some really good pay-per-views during this span of a few years, and especially this year at WrestleMania. Many of you, when I ask what are some of your favorite WrestleManias, WrestleMania 21 is always mentioned multiple times, and when you look at it, there was some exquisite wrestling on this card. And I think another reason why this was never on my radar as one of the best is because I also was a little bit rejecting John Cena and Batista. This was their big day. This was the launching of the both of them. They both won titles on this show after that crazy finish at the Royal Rumble a couple of months before this. And they were clearly WWE's next new big stars that they were going to try to build. John Cena was kind of a discount and replacement for The Rock, and Batista was a discount Brock Lesnar. And I felt the two of them just weren't going to live up to the legacies that Rock and Brock left behind. But for me, it wasn't about the WWE title and the World Heavyweight title match at WrestleMania 21. It was about 3 incredible singles matches, 3 of my favorite in WrestleMania history. The first one opened up the show, Rey Mysterio defeating Eddie Guerrero. And looking back, I'm really happy that this match took place at WrestleMania. I'm really glad that these two friends got a chance to wrestle on the grandest stage of them all, because I think it would be 7 months later, right, that Eddie Guerrero would pass away. So this was a big deal for the two of them, and Rey picked up the win here. The two of them were actually tag team champions at the time, which up until that point, and possibly ever, I got to dig back in WrestleMania history to find out, but I don't believe tag team champions have ever wrestled each other at WrestleMania. And if they have, Rey and Eddie were definitely the first. But this match puts a smile on my face because, number one, it opened the show. Up until this point, only 20 matches in the history of wrestling can say they opened up WrestleMania, and Mysterio and Eddie got to do it. Wasn't maybe quite as exciting or memorable as their Halloween Havoc match back in WCW, but damn close, and a damn beautiful wrestling contest. Love you both. It was also the site of the very first ever Money in the Bank ladder match in WWE history. This whole briefcase nonsense got started at WrestleMania 21, and Edge, of course, we know, won that briefcase. He would hang on to it for close to a year. He wouldn't cash it in until the following January at that New Year's Revolution pay-per-view. And I believe Chris Benoit, Jericho, Christian Kane, and I think Shelton Benjamin were all involved in this ladder match, and it was one of the best Money in the Bank ladder matches they've ever had, and it was the first one, which makes it very, very memorable. But kind of getting back to the wrestling that I was alluding to a minute ago that made this WrestleMania so memorable for me, it was also one of my favorite Undertaker matches at WrestleMania. Randy Orton was the young guy that was given the big match against The Undertaker. And here we are going into WrestleMania 35, and Randy Orton is scheduled to face AJ Styles. He has had a lot of these legendary non-title one-on-one WrestleMania matches. He's worked with a lot of guys like CM Punk and Seth Rollins. Here with The Undertaker, Kane, I think, is another one. AJ Styles this year, and none of these matches are for any championships. And they're always solid. I mean, Randy Orton, love him or hate him, he's a pro, and he was very early on in his career at this point. He was only a couple of years in, and he's going in against The Undertaker at WrestleMania. And I remember, even though I was starting to get mentally checked out of the business around this time, I did watch this WrestleMania, and I still watched all the pay-per-views, and I watched a good portion of all the Monday Night Raws. So I remember this well, and I felt in my heart that this might be it for The Undertaker. I thought that if Triple H didn't knock him off at WrestleMania 17, A few years prior, when I thought Undertaker might potentially lose this match, I thought this might be it for him. You know, Randy Orton had won the World Heavyweight title a few months before, and he immediately got it taken off of him because this was still Triple H's company, and he was reigning supreme in the whole Reign of Terror nonsense. So Randy Orton, I felt like maybe WWE was going to give him this bone since he's not really in the cards for a title run at the moment. So I really thought he had a chance. I thought Randy Orton could potentially be the guy to finally end the Undertaker streak. We know he did not. Undertaker beat him, but it was a damn good match, and Randy Orton came oh so close to knocking off the Dead Man, one of my favorite WrestleMania matches ever. Hats off to both of those guys. And in what was my favorite match of the night, I think it was most everyone's favorite match of the night, the absolute masterpiece by Kurt Angle and Shawn Michaels. Great fucking match. The absolute epitome of what a WrestleMania match should be. This was when you started to realize that Shawn Michaels was really Mr. WrestleMania. He had only been back for a couple of years, and he put on a damn clinic against Kurt Angle, and he took the loss. He tapped out to Kurt Angle. He would go on to have another couple of matches with him. I think he beat him at another pay-per-view in the summer, and then they went on to have like a draw on Monday Night Raw. But it was a pretty fun rivalry between the two. But this WrestleMania match, to me, is the most special of all of them. Very dramatic finish as well, with Shawn Michaels fighting and scratching and clawing and doing everything he can to get out of that damn ankle lock. But in the end, he's got no choice. And that was a fun match. Just brings a tear to your eye watching that. And here we are just a couple of weeks away from Kurt Angle's final WrestleMania match. Like I said earlier on, John Cena and Batista were both launched at this WrestleMania. John Cena defeated JBL on the undercard for the WWE title in a match that I didn't really think was that great. I know Cena was still over around this time, and it was pretty obvious that he was going to win the WWE title when you looked at what they were doing storyline-wise, but the match itself was, I don't know, just kind of fell flat, and I thought there was much better wrestling on this show than these two. The main event, I think, was a little bit better, and it was a little dirtier and more hard-hitting and brutal, and I think Batista was bleeding, Triple H was as well. But in the end, I didn't really care much for Batista. You know, I grew to love him, but I just never thought that Batista was anywhere close to as talented or as good as Brock Lesnar. And I felt like Batista was kind of moved into that monster void that was left by Brock, and he just didn't measure up. I mean, nobody really can. It's not Batista's fault. There's never been and probably never will be again a physical specimen like this damn Brock Lesnar guy. But Batista, to me, just didn't cut it. But at the same time, I was all for WWE trying to make some new guys. I mean, Cena and Batista, this was their show, but really the pros and the veterans really carried the show in terms of in the ring with Mysterio and Eddie and Taker and Kurt and Shawn. You know, to me, those guys made this show. And it was a very star-studded WrestleMania as well. We had Hulk Hogan on this show doing the whole spot with Muhammad Hassan. And this was Hulk Hogan's first time back in a ring in a couple of years. He worked with Vince at 19, and he was gone for WrestleMania 20. WWE and Hogan were kind of on the outs during that time in 2004, and to me, that's a huge missed opportunity. I mean, Hulk Hogan was not at WrestleMania 10 or WrestleMania 20. Both of them were in Madison Square Garden, and I cannot believe that WWE was never able to bring him back. Even in 1994, he hadn't even left the company yet, or he hadn't signed with WCW yet, I should say. So he technically could have appeared at 10, and then we missed him at 20, and finally now he's back at 21. It wasn't one of my favorite things that they ever did. I wasn't a fan of the Muhammad Hassan gimmick. I think the only part of the segment that I liked was kind of at the end when they had the big flag kind of drop behind him. I thought it was just a really cool looking visual, but that's all I really remember about that. But still, seeing Hogan there was a kind of a big deal. I liked the Piper's Pit much better because you had Roddy Piper and Stone Cold Steve Austin, two really interesting guys together in a ring at WrestleMania, and they would have a very interesting kind of personal issue too near the end of Roddy Piper's life. Kind of ironic there, but still, you know, the greatest guy on the stick from the 80s, you know, Piper's Pit, Roddy Piper, fucking legend, hosting the show with, you know, WWE's biggest star ever, arguably, maybe other than Hogan. So when you throw in guys like Austin and Hogan and Piper, you got a ton of good wrestling taking place. You got two young guys winning world titles and trying to carve a path into the future. All of this with the backdrop of Los Angeles and Hollywood, I thought made for a really excellent WrestleMania, and it has cracked my list and now sits at number 9 of my favorite of all time.